Thank you for joining us today. This is Can We Reduce the Cost of Cybersecurity? Talking through some strategies to cut costs while maintaining a good level of security for all of us. Security is one of these areas that's very much in its infancy. I think we've been an industry of increasing budgets every year. So we thought it was a good idea to try and tackle some of those issues. I'm joined by Alexandra Winston-Dew, who's going to be chairing this session. Alex is from our reputation management team, and I'll let Alex introduce herself.
As Joe said, I'm a partner in the reputation team here at Mishcon and tend to deal with companies that are going through the crisis times of when cybersecurity goes wrong. But more importantly are the other panelists today, and we have from MDR Cyber, Mike Owen, who's the Director of Cyber Consulting at Mishcon. And also we have Simon Lamb. Simon is the European Regional Risk and Security Officer for Compass Group. The level of cyber attacks increases as people continue to rely on, people continue to rely on technology more and more. So what you're talking about the amount of money that you spend on implementing technological solutions or developing technology and then balancing that out with cyber costs. Is that something that can be done? And especially now, is it reasonable to reduce the cost of cybersecurity?
What we're seeing is, this greater reliance on technology, which we've been talking about for the past decade. And if we accept partly that technology and cyber risk are intertwined, then instinctively you think the more you spend on technology, the more you spend on digital, the more you'll have to spend on cybersecurity. It used to be that you would apply good risk management principles, you try and work out what all your risks were, work out what to do about them. And every cybersecurity person is taught that you can accept risk and you can transfer it as well as kind of protecting against it. However, in reality, I've never really seen a structured process for someone just saying, actually, you know what, we've got that cybersecurity risk over there. We're not going to spend any money on it. We are going to accept that that will happen. If we are going to accept that every business is going to be digitally transformed and that we're going to live in this different world, we can't carry on with a kind of steady march of increasing cybersecurity budgets. At some point, we have to think about how we do some of these things differently.
Simon, from your perspective, are you coming from this at the same angle as Joe, that it's not possible to get that proportion level with the amount of money that's spent on technology?
Absolutely. I think, for me, it's very much a case of being able to focus on doing the basics brilliantly. I echo Joe's thoughts around the whole sort of risk management piece and really identifying where your crown jewels are and focusing your attention on there. And really sort of starting to make sure you're doing things like patch management, asset management, multi-factor authentication, the basic stuff that any reasonable organisation would expect you to have in place.
And Mike, from your experience in both working within organisations that have this problem, but also advising clients who have this problem, what can you add to Simon's practical tips there in terms of doing the basics very well?
We are moving beyond the days when everyone in security is going to be able to have a joint team doing everything that you could ever want to from a cybersecurity perspective. What we need to start thinking about doing is figuring out how we can work with other teams to enable them to do cybersecurity, empowering people to actually make informed security decisions on your behalf.
Quite a difficult balance to achieve, isn't it? Because you can imagine a CEO not being particularly happy with that kind of unexplained level of risk. So Simon, how do you explain that to people who need to understand how to be more mature at this time when technology is growing so quickly?
My thoughts are very much along the line that it should be a business-led cybersecurity strategy, and simple things like making sure you've got the right level of representation on your various steering and governance boards. Previous companies, such as Royal Mail, very much started to invite people to be more part of the journey and actually get some really good input and thoughts from these people. One thing I very much used to encourage my previous teams is that you need to take accountability for making sure that people understand what you're trying to tell them. So rather than being the sort of the techie and go, oh, we need these firewalls or these various ports open, etc., 90% of the people within the business just won't understand that, and it's our job to translate that and make sure that they do understand it and take accountability for that.
And Joe, from your experience of talking to people at those various different levels in the business, how do those conversations go, and how is money involved in those conversations?
You see this in all disciplines, is an inability for people to kind of to talk in the language of somebody else. But I think that is money involved? I mean, yes, when you're having those kind of senior level discussions, money is always involved. Once you get past a certain kind of point, you need to be saying, well, this is how much it's going to cost to run the team. This is what the people are going to cost. This is what I'm going to have to spend on technology. But here's actually how much this is going to cost us as an organisation if we don't get it right. What's the cost of our reputation? What will the impact on various areas of our business be? That there's definitely more of a trend in those conversations, I think, to talk about quantifying cybersecurity risk. But to have those conversations in the first place, you need to be speaking the language of the people you're speaking to.
So one of the things I found quite powerful with enabling those conversations is defining a company's risk appetite. And then by working with the board and saying, okay, right, or with the risk committee in this case, right, okay, our risk appetite is this, and define a statement against it, we could then map enhancement and maturity programs against a target level of maturity as well. And that then enabled the conversation to say, right, we're not going to achieve perfection here. We're not a government company that's making very, very secret stuff, and therefore we don't need to aim for a 5 out of 5 maturity in a lot of our areas.
How do you make that pound stretch further in times of the global pandemic, Brexit, where budgets are getting really, really tight?
First of all, the focus on, do you really need the most expensive solution? The second thing then, a lot of us work in outsourced IT environments, so it's making sure we get the most out of our IT outsourced partner, working with the vendors directly and saying, like, can you come up with something creative and something a bit more entrepreneurial when it comes to your licensing models? The other piece for me is that, in a large, complex outsourcing environment, it's very easy for the detail to slip through the net.
Mike, what else might you be looking to in terms of preserving what you need as a core, and what can we take away from the budgets?
It sort of goes back to prioritization around the threats that you honestly see the business facing and how what you have in place addresses those threats. If the business were to come back to you with, for example, a lower budget than you had asked for, and you had a good quantified means of justifying all the elements in that budget, then it comes back down to a mature conversation with the business. Modern businesses run with a number of risks. The only reason why they previously assumed that they weren't running with cyber risks was because we didn't have those mature conversations where we were properly explaining to the business why certain things couldn't be done. So if money's tight, that makes it even more important that you have those mature conversations.
And Joe, what have you seen from the wider market that feeds back into these points?
Risk management used to be the be-all and end-all of good cybersecurity. We're going to identify our risk and we'll do no more or less than the risk dictates. And that means, we're doing exactly what we need to do. I just don't think that's true anymore. I think that risk management has become this huge beast where we identify all of this huge amount of risk, and now we have to do something about all of it because, look, it's really risky. I think actually we're seeing some trends mainly coming out of US government and actually are not necessarily becoming risk-based, but becoming threat-based. So working out exactly what the people you care about are going to do to you and how they're going to do it. And in there, that means that you have to make some decisions. Sometimes you have to admit that sometimes you're not very interesting as a business. The people who are going to attack us look like this. Maybe you're worried about ransomware gangs. They're going to do it in this way, and I'm going to make sure I dealt with those things specifically based on some data and hard science. The other thing I think is that actually there's a need to do some of the more boring stuff in cybersecurity. So this is looking at how you manage cybersecurity as a function or as a process. Everyone has all these great playbooks or great processes on how the process should work. Very few people look at how the process does work on the ground. And I think seeing cybersecurity professionals start to look at what they're actually doing, where there's waste in those processes, how those processes can be tailored down to deliver exactly what is needed to prevent those threats, feels like the direction of travel for me. And we're seeing some early signs of this on the threat-based side of things.
And Mike, have you seen other organisations try a similar thing, or where's it gone well, where's it gone wrong?
People are starting to take threat assessments much more seriously, and Obviously you can get that done in-house, you can get third parties to do it for you, but it has proven a very valuable way to do exactly what Joe's describing. So you figure out what your threats are, you figure out how they act, and then using something like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, you start to decompose that into what they do.
Is there enough people with the right skills in these organisations or not?
I think the people within the organisation are going to know their business the best. But I think them bringing in, external third parties who have done this maybe a few times before and helped and guided companies through that, and then can bring their experience. But making sure that you're not just you're not just taking what your third party is telling you. You're applying a level of your own business context against it.
Well, how does that resonate with you, Mike?
If you think of a security team that's been working a certain way for a number of years, suddenly turning up to the board and saying, we've come up with this completely new idea, can raise a few eyebrows. And in cases like that, it definitely is worth having someone behind you who has done that change before. I can also say, having worked in-house at security teams, that there is this unfortunate truth that Simon's pointing out, that if a consultant comes in and says the exact same thing that you just said, it may have more weight behind it. And that's just a fact of life for us, unfortunately.
Joe, can you add anything to that point?
There is no doubt a skill shortage in certain areas. We need more people in cybersecurity. We also need cybersecurity to be a lot more diverse. As you can see from this panel, cybersecurity is not a diverse industry at the moment. I am buoyed by, we see cybersecurity apprenticeships now. We have some ourselves inside our organisation. There more and more pathways are leading to cybersecurity, which will lead to a better, more diverse industry with better outcomes and ultimately reduce cost.
I think there's also things that we can do as security professionals to kind of encourage people to be interested in our subject. Before COVID, I was planning on speaking at my boys' secondary school and doing a series of workshops just to show them, so this is what cybersecurity is all about, and try and encourage those interests. I think as professionals, the more we can do to encourage people to be part of this this environment, the better.
We've got a bit more time before we need to conclude the session. I was wondering if there was any point from the panelists that you wanted to raise in connection with this subject.
The one thing I thought was perhaps worth us talking about is, Alex, since we've got you here and your rather unique skill set in cybersecurity. Alex, as she mentioned in her introduction, is one of our reputation management lawyers. So Alex spends a lot of time either stopping people getting into high profile trouble or potentially getting them out of it, which can include a cyber incident, and we lean heavily on Alex and her team for that. So one of the things we see a lot from security vendors is that your company's reputation will cost you X. And reputation is held out as this kind of almost the holy grail of the thing that can be damaged the most. I wonder if you had any kind of thoughts on actually kind of what does reputation cost? What is reputational damage?
One of the major issues when you're trying to bring a claim in court in relation to reputation damage is actually demonstrating the damage that has been caused. It's a general erosion of confidence that I think is the real determining factor in these kinds of crises. When a crisis like a cyber attack comes along, that trust is eroded, and people will just start voting with their feet by just choosing alternative organisations to provide their products or systems that they had been purchasing from the client.
So in terms of kind of protecting reputations then, do you think it is better that organisations invest in protecting reputation first and early, or actually is it the same as the cybersecurity strategy we're proposing, which is to detect there's an issue that might affect your reputation and respond to it?
I think there are maybe three key things to remember when it comes to a reputation crisis. The first thing is to make sure that you're doing at least the industry standard in terms of protection of your customers or information or whomever your stakeholders are. The second thing is to do what you say you're going to do, and don't overpromise. And then finally, I think the key thing is have your team ready. Make sure that you can turn to the best people that you can to help you when things really do go really wrong. If your board do not understand about cybersecurity and the risks of any fallout, and they are going to be the poster person or the spokesperson, give them the language that they need to understand and explain to your customers, shareholders, or any other third party.
Thanks, Alex. That's really useful.
I should probably conclude this section by saying thank you very much to the panelists, Joe Hancock, Mike Owen and Simon Lamb, for taking us through this very interesting discussion of cybersecurity and costs. And we look forward to speaking with you all again.